South Africa has received a 628 million rand grant from the European Union in support of its green hydrogen agenda. Energy and Electricity Minister Dr Kgosientsho Ramokgopa says the grant from the EU will be partially used in the implementation of a strategy also for Transnet. Now, while the other part of the grant will go to the development and construction of infrastructure in the South African green hydrogen value chain. Minister Ramokgopa joins us now to expand on how this move will assist to ensure that we have consistent electricity supply. Minister, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. We have had no load shedding. Of course, some areas dealing with load reduction, but we have had no load shedding and now more capacity, it seems, coming into the country. Talk to us about what this grant, and I quite like the fact that we're talking about a grant, but what it means for our own electricity supply.
Oh, good morning, Laledi, and good morning to the viewers of Newzroom. Thank you very much for the invitation. Well, the grant will not help us in the immediate, in the resolution of the energy deficit, electricity deficit in the country. But it's going to help us most certainly going into the future, because we're trying to ensure that we don't have a return of load shedding. We're able to build what I call energy sovereignty. And one of the technology solutions that exist, and South Africa is very strong at, is a technology where we use green hydrogen, either as an energy carrier or as a storage of electricity. So we are pursuing a number of projects in the country that are going to help us, one, to ensure that we are able to decarbonize electricity generation in the country. And secondly, to also help to bolster the South African economy. We have identified Bukubai in the Northern Cape, and we also have a project that is privately sponsored but endorsed by the Eastern Cape government called Hive in the Eastern Cape. These two projects are likely going to reconfigure the economic landscape of those two provinces. But and then the second one is that we're sitting with a technology that has been tried and tested. It's called the Fischer-Tropsch technology, is the one that is used to produce hydrogen. And that technology is sitting with Sasol. Sasol has got an obligation to decarbonize, if you like, their Secunda plant, which is the single biggest point of emissions on the continent. And it's confronted with a serious threat of the likelihood of not being able to access some of the lucrative market in Western Europe, in the European Union area, because there's a requirement going into the future by the European Union that the products that are going to access their markets should be produced from clean technologies. If that's not the case, they're going to impose the tariff, and therefore these products will be uncompetitive in those markets. So it's an existential question for Sasol. So we're doing everything possible to work with Sasol and with the Eastern Cape and Northern Cape governments to ensure that South Africa continues to be a leader on the new generation of the usage of clean technologies to generate electricity and also contribute to our nationally determined contribution and the net zero path. So it's certainly something that is coming in handy. It's going to help us also to graduate a number of projects, green hydrogen projects that are in the pipeline. If you look at the project value chain, we really want to get these projects to financial close so that the construction can get going. Yeah. Certainly, we're not the only ones in the world who are pursuing these opportunities. Namibia is one of those, Kenya, Mauritania, and Egypt, at least on the African continent, they're pursuing those opportunities. So it's important that we're agile, we move with speed, we're able to coordinate our efforts with the industry, we're able to ensure that we design a financing instrument to fund the transition, and green hydrogen is one of those opportunities. And it's going to ensure that there is justice in the just transition, because we're going to create a whole new economy as the 500 million of the 600 million will focus on ensuring that we mature, if you like, the green hydrogen value chain from extraction of these minerals, the rare earth minerals, that goes into the production of the electrolyzers that are needed to produce green hydrogen. Those minerals are found here in the country. We are the one country on the continent, and in fact in the world, who've got exceptional skills in mining. So that capacity exists. We are sitting with those natural endowments. And then we have the sun, we have the wind, we have the land that is not competing with other commercial uses like agriculture, especially in the Northern Cape. And that's why we're well positioned for us to be able to take advantage of the green hydrogen economy.
Let me ask you this, Minister, and you talk about the importance of that just transition, right? And one of the things that, this is why at the beginning of the discussion I talked about, I highlighted that it's a grant. And I thought that's important to highlight because for years now, African countries particularly have been asking that if we are going to have an energy transition process taking place, that there needs to be money that is being pumped into that work by Western economies. But for the longest time, that money has been coming in the form of loans and not grants. So how did we get this one right?
Well, absolutely correct, Naledi. So first thing is that for us to exploit the opportunities, green hydrogen, and mature these projects into actual commercial projects that extract value for the South African economy, we are going to need tens of billions of rands for us to be able to realize that opportunity. But it all starts with a credible business plan, ensuring that we invest in the planning of those projects. And one of the things that has been prohibitive is that very few people, very few financial institutions are ready to invest in what we call the pre-feasibility and feasibility studies. And this undermined our ability to ensure that we're able to package these projects for the market so that the potential investors can invest in this project, so that we're able to surface their commercial value, the return on investment. You need skills to do that, and those skills have to be paid for. So what this grant does is to help us to resolve that question, the upstream question of the project life cycle, to ensure that the project are credible, that we are able to make a compelling case. And you are absolutely correct in saying that this comes in a form of a grant, and this institution, that those grants will flow through some of the candidate institutions from the European Union, their member states, but most significantly for us, they are going to partner with the DBSA, so that in the course of putting these plans together, we also are able to build our own skills going into the future. These skills, financial skills, technical engineering skills, so that there's a greater levels of depth of skills in the country to help us to ensure that when there are other projects coming on stream in the pipeline, we've built a significant body of skills in the country to help us to take advantage of the green hydrogen economy. So yes, you are absolutely correct. It's in the form of a grant that doesn't have conditions. By definition, most grants don't have conditions. Of course, it's directed towards the green hydrogen and also to help Transnet to decarbonize. So it's coming in at the right time when we have a pipeline of projects, and we hope that we're going to graduate this project. But what is significant for us, I think, as a department, is to ensure that we get the projects going. And I'm really excited about the enthusiasm by Premier Mabuyane in the Eastern Cape, Premier Zamani Sol, the leadership of Sasol, determined and transfixed on ensuring that we're able to graduate this project. They become actual projects into the ground. And then in the immediate, during construction, you are able to create these jobs. You are able to beneficiate the value chain. And like I said, we're sitting with the minerals. You need to beneficiate those. You are going to ensure that you domesticate those opportunities as opposed to exporting these opportunities to other countries. They get to be beneficiated, and we get the electrolyzers back into the country. So we're looking at the entire value chain. And that's why when we made the announcement, I was with Minister Tau, so that the industrial component is not lost on us. So as we look to ensure that we're energy secure, we need to ensure that people are into jobs. We grow the South African economy. So we're looking at the totality of this intervention, not just a narrow consideration of whether we have electricity or not going into the future. Very important. So we mustn't decouple that from the need for us to grow the South African economy and people put people into jobs.
Okay. Yeah, let me just say this though, Minister, because and while the announcement is such important work, and I don't think anyone can disagree with that. I do see two challenges here, and I'm keen to hear what you think about those. You mentioned the Eastern Cape, for instance. We've got our reporter down in the Eastern Cape who's taking a look at, you know, what construction mafias and certainly what extortion gangs are doing in syndicates, right? This is a massive infrastructure project that we're talking about here that will take time, resources, skills, but also those resources need to be protected. So talk to us about how you ring fence that, right? And what you do with those that say, well, you know, we can argue for a 30% stake, if you will. So that's the first one. The second one is, you do then have part of this grant that's going towards Transnet as well, and you can talk to us about what that would mean for Transnet. But the other challenge is, do we have a good history of interministerial collaboration here, where your department needs to be working perhaps with the department that certainly oversees what Transnet does, right?
Yes, or maybe the first point to be made is that the projects don't have to be protected from communities. So projects are embedded in communities. And that's why it's important that the socialization of a project, it's an area of interest to ensure that when a project comes of whatever magnitude into an area, first you need to go into that space, communicate with the leaders and the broader community, and you must be able to illustrate where the real benefits are. So I'm not talking about the contribution of just labor, but substantive benefits in those projects. I think it's important that there's that appreciation. And then there's a criminal element that we leave to Minister Mkhulu and the team, General Masemola, the commissioner. I think they've got enough capacity. They are trying to demonstrate now that this is an area of focus. But what we know is that this project ought to happen. And what we also know is that the leadership across the country really are determined to ensure that we get to involve communities in the most substantive fashion, so that they are the first line of defense of these projects, because they are going to have ownership of these projects. And you are absolutely correct. I mean, we're talking about the magnitude of these projects. I mean, runs into tens of billions of rands, and they are going to be sustained over a period of time. So they are going to become, if you like, the life of those communities. So how they get to be introduced is a critical factor in the success of this project. And then the second point you are raising, you are absolutely correct. So we have to undermine silos. And this is the point that President Ramaphosa raised in our Lekgotla. So this thing of compartmentalization, creating artificial walls between the departments, are the kind of things that are delaying our ability to move with speed and make the kind of interventions that are necessary. And that's why myself and Minister Tau found it appropriate that, as opposed to having two separate meetings with the EU Commissioner, we're the ones who said to the Commissioner that, no, we see this as a value chain. We see this as a whole. So it's important that we have a joint conversation so that Minister Tau is able to raise the issues of the industrial components of the work that we are doing, the need for us to engage the local infrastructure facility, in this instance, the DBSA, the IDC, must be involved. So it's not about just receiving that grant. It's how that grant gets to us and how the institutions that are local, domestic, are able to benefit from that as we resolve the bigger question of the South African economy. And that's why we're pulling it together. And then I made the point that we've been working exceptionally closely with the Premier of the Eastern Cape, the Premier of the Northern Cape, also across the spheres of government, not just a horizontal coordination, but also a vertical coordination. So what you're going to be seeing is that the whole of government are coming into a space and working with communities and, of course, industry. I did say that the project in the Eastern Cape is private sector sponsored, and also the project in the Northern Cape has got a big involvement of SASO. So what you're seeing is a government, national, horizontal coordination, vertical coordination going into provinces, and of course the local subnational state, and also bringing industry and working with communities to deliver this project. I know that these two projects, they've invested a lot, I must say, those provinces, in ensuring that they bring communities on board. so that communities are the ones who are able to better explain what this project is about and what these benefits are. And they must realize those benefits within the construction of the project and the life of that project going into the future. And we're determined to do that. And the kind of action that we're seeing now, it seeks to ensure that we clear the ground and allow for these projects to land there. And green hydrogen, I must say, Naledi, presents huge prospects for the South African economy. I mean, it's a frontier. We've identified that as one of the key frontiers. The Europeans, by the way, they are not coming here. It's not altruistic intentions. They need this fuel source for them to be able to transition. And the only reason why we are a credible partner is because we've got endowments that they don't have. So I've mentioned that we've got the minerals.
Yeah,
the second thing
the natural resources, yes.
The natural resources, The second advantage we have the real estate, the size of land that is not competing with other uses. Europe, I mean, the size of Europe is almost the size of us. So they don't have that luxury. Okay. The third one is the sun and the wind, and then we have the technology. What we don't have in abundance is the money, the financing. So it's important that we see this as a symbiotic relations, protect sovereign interest, and ensure that it's a win-win solution.
Yeah. Minister, thank you so much for speaking to us. The Energy and Electricity Minister there, Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, speaking to us about how that 628 million rand grant from the European Union in support of our green hydrogen agenda will be spent, and how it hopefully will keep the lights on in the long term. Months of no load shedding so far this year, and long so may it stay.